Disney Storybook Collection. Disney's The Prince and the Pauper. Once upon a time, there was a kindly king who ruled with fairness and generosity. His son, the prince, was busy with his studies, but he loved the kingdom too. It was a time of great peace, and the people of the land were very happy. But then the king grew sick and could no longer watch over his people. The greedy leader of the king's guards, Captain Pete, saw the king's illness as his chance to get rich. Day after day, the captain and his soldiers took money and other valuable objects from the people of the kingdom. Neither the king nor the prince knew what Captain Pete was doing, and the king's subjects kept getting poorer and poorer. One very cold morning, two peasants named Mickey and Goofy watched as Captain Pete drove the royal coach past them. When Mickey's dog Pluto spotted some sausages hanging from the coach, he ran after it. The dog was very hungry because Captain Pete and his men had taken so much of the kingdom's food. The coach disappeared through the palace gates, with Pluto following close behind. "Stop!" Mickey shouted as he ran after his dog. "Come back!" But it was too late. The gates had shut behind Pluto. When Mickey got to the gate, he asked if he could go inside to get his dog. The guard was about to say no when he got a good look at the peasant's face. "Your Majesty," the guard said, gasping. He quickly waved Mickey inside. Mickey didn't care what the guard had called him. He just wanted his dog back. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the prince was sitting through another boring history lesson with Professor Horace. To amuse himself, he took out a pea shooter and aimed it at his valet, Donald. Whack! The prince landed a shot right on Donald's head. Whack! Another one hit the valet's bottom. Professor Horace was just about to scold the prince when he heard a commotion outside. The prince ran to the window and saw Captain Pete holding up a bag with a peasant trapped inside. It was Mickey. The captain had found him wandering around and captured him. The prince ordered Pete to let the captive out of the bag and send him inside. Pete sent Mickey into the castle, but the young pauper got lost in one of the many halls. Mickey was so busy looking around, he stumbled right into a suit of armor. The suit's helmet fell off and dropped down onto his head. Clang! Just then, the prince entered the hall, and another helmet fell down onto his head. Neither the prince nor the pauper could see where they were going. They walked blindly until, bang! They crashed into each other. Slowly, they lifted the fronts of their helmets. "You look just like me!" they shouted in unison. The prince couldn't believe his luck. This was just the chance he had been waiting for. Now he could leave the boring palace and no one would know. He quickly convinced Mickey to trade places with him. To Mickey, the idea of living in a luxurious palace as a prince sounded amazing. What harm could it do? They swapped clothes and the prince headed for the door. "I'll be back in the blink of an eye," he promised. Then he left, eager to explore the world. The prince made it outside and passed the royal guard, but then he ran into Pluto. The dog sniffed him a few times and walked off. He hadn't been fooled. The prince was not his master. When Goofy saw the prince, he thought he was Mickey and began to talk to him. The prince ran off, leaving a confused Goofy behind. Back at the palace, instead of eating tasty food and being treated royally, Mickey was trying to follow the princess geography lesson. It was not going well. The prince wasn't doing any better outside the castle walls. He tried playing fetch with some dogs, but they chased him over a fence. Disappointed, he went to the marketplace. There he saw one of the captain's guards stealing food from poor people. "Halt! I am the prince," he cried, holding up his royal ring. Then he climbed atop the cart and gave the food to the hungry peasants. The peasants were overjoyed. They hadn't eaten in a long while. When the guard saw the princess ring, he rushed back to tell Pete what had happened. When Captain Pete heard the news, he came up with a plan. He would get rid of the real prince and make the fake one do whatever he demanded. That way, Pete would rule the kingdom. Meanwhile, Goofy had found the prince walking about town and brought him to his house. A while later, the church bells tolled throughout the land. The king had died. The prince told Goofy that he was not his friend Mickey, but the new ruler. He showed Goofy his ring. "I must go to the palace right away," he said. "I will miss my father greatly, but now it is my duty to take over as king." Then he leaped out of his chair and headed toward the door. But Captain Pete was waiting for him just outside. The guards quickly captured the prince, brought him to the palace, and threw him into the dungeon. Donald was already inside. "I see your royal ring," Pete said from outside the prince's cell. "But it won't do you any good. As soon as the pauper is crowned king, I shall unmask him as an impostor and rule the kingdom myself." With an evil laugh, he left. The situation looked hopeless for the prince and the entire kingdom. Just then, a strange-looking guard came to the dungeon door. It was Goofy. "Sit tight, little buddy," he said as he got the prince out of his cell. But Pete's guards were close behind. Luckily, the prince, Goofy, and Donald escaped after a long chase. Meanwhile, Mickey was trying to avoid being crowned king. He knew that Captain Pete would keep stealing from the people of the kingdom, so he stopped the ceremony. I'm the prince, so whatever I order must be done, right? Mickey asked the man who was about to crown him. The man nodded, and Mickey ordered the guards to seize Pete. But Pete was ready for this. "He is not the prince," yelled the wicked captain. "He's an impostor. Seize him." "I'm not an impostor, though," came a voice from a high balcony. It was the real prince. Everyone gasped and looked up in time to see the prince swing down to the ground on a chandelier. Swords slashed and fists flew as Mickey, the prince, and their friends struggled against Pete and the guards. Pluto even took a bite out of Pete's pants. Soon the fight was over. The evil captain was arrested, and the prince was crowned king. The kingdom was once again in kind, caring hands. With Mickey and Goofy by his side, the new king ruled happily ever after.